I would like to just introduce to you Amanda Symon, and she is an expert on Māori rock art, and she's going to be giving us a short presentation today. Just before I hand over to her, quick health and safety. If we need to leave the building for any emergency, we just head on out this way at the back, or we can head out through this door and to the right and meet in the car park around the corner there. And toilets are just at the rear there as well. So I'd just like to hand over to you now. We will run this talk for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then there will be time for questions at the end. Sit back and relax.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Amanda Symon. I am a trustee for the Ngāi Tahu Māori Rock Art Trust. Prior to being a trustee on the trust, I worked as curator for the Ngāi Tahu Māori Rock Art Trust for 14 years. And so a part of my work was very focused on all of the many rock art sites throughout Te Waipounamu, but a good part of it was looking at how to better protect them. So part of my talk tonight is just kind of talking about rock art, what is it, how old is it, all of those things, and then looking kind of more detailed at how best to protect it. So my presentation tonight is multi-sensory. There'll be magic involved. So, and one part of it, I have to start with this. It's not me drinking, it's not gin or anything. I assure you, it's just a little thing that we'll get to later on. Magic. Do I have a clicker or a pointer?
Oh, yes.
Oh, show you. Okay, so we're here in Duntroon, and very, very close to us there are many, many rock art sites. Can make us do something.
Not working.
Right.
Oh,
Oh, I've got the pointer working.
Pointer
Oh,
works.
just a minute. Just do the manual
Sorry.
version. I told you it would be multi-sensory and interactive. It's mostly me doing interactive stuff. There you go. Is that working? Oh,
there we go.
At last. So yeah, I work for the Ngāi Tahu Māori Rock Art Trust. So what is the Ngāi Tahu Māori Rock Art Trust? It's a charitable trust established by Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu. So Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu is the Ngāi Tahu iwi governing body. So the idea with the establishment of the trust was to have one entity that was a focal point, focused entirely on the protection, management and celebration of this tribal treasure. And just pointing out that the Ngāi Tahu Rock Art Trust logo is a piece of rock art from this very district and earthquakes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the Rock Art Trust is a flat roots organisation. So it supports Ngāi Tahu Rūnanga. So Rūnanga are local tribal councils. So the Rūnanga for this area is Waitaki, but there's 18 Rūnanga within the Ngāi Tahu tribal boundary, which is a large portion of the South Island. So our job is to support Ngāi Tahu Rūnanga to manage, protect and preserve the rock art within their takiwa, or their area of authority, and with their community partners, all of you good people, to celebrate and engage with their rock art heritage. So just as I go through, I'll explain images as well. So this is a trip that we did down to Fiordland. So rock art is very widespread. This is on Chalky Island, and you can see in the background there's some beautiful tiny little rock art images, and this is a cave that you can only get to at low tide, and when we went there it was also inhabited by penguins, so that's quite exciting. So you can imagine the challenges of managing rock art in such conditions. That's not the half of it. So where is it? Māori rock art sites are found, oh my pointer works, I'll use that, as far north as Tonga Bay and as far south as Preservation Inlet, right down the bottom here in Fiordland. But the highest densities of sites are found in the limestone-rich valleys of South Canterbury and North Otago. So, does anybody know, or can anybody guess how many rock art sites there might be within the South Island and the bid?
5,000.
Okay.
Sites or
Sites. Let's say sites. How many sites are there?
35.
300.
Whoa. I don't know where we're going yet, but, and we're all within Curator, kind of. So let's see if we can find the answer. 761.
Holy
Yes, more than you'd think. More than you'd think. Yeah, so 761 Māori rock art sites have been recorded in Te Waipoma in the South Island to date. So of those, 286 are located in North Otago, with a further 412 in South Canterbury. So the Aoraki region in particular has the highest density of rock art sites in New Zealand.
Amanda, do you think that that's due to the number of artists, or is it more just that that was preserved on those stones and is visible, do you think? Would there be art elsewhere that we just couldn't see because it's worn off, or...?
Yeah, I think what we see was the tip of the iceberg, and we'll talk more about how the art's made and how old it might be and all of those things which kind of feed into that question. There's a lot unknown about the rock art, so I hope you haven't come here for me to answer all your questions about rock art, so I don't know the answer. But anyway, so here we are in Duntroon. We are the star in the centre, and within a very, very close range of us, there are close to 200 rock art sites. It's pretty exciting.
And only 2 are public?
Yes.
Yeah, so the rest are all on private land.
Yeah, that's right. And only 2 of the sites in this area are directly administered by Tahu as well. So that's another interesting statistic. So I'm just going to kind of cycle through a few of the questions, the most frequently asked questions about rock art, and I get asked a lot, how old is the rock art? Now, there has been an attempt to carbon date the rock art, but unfortunately that wasn't successful. So we have to kind of look at other ways to think about how old might that rock art be. So the image that you see here is actually rock art from Hawaii. So that rock art is picked using a hard stone on a lava field, pick, to create those beautiful designs. And what they are is human figures, so like this. So our rock art here in Te Waipoma is quite similar in style and in subject to Eastern Polynesian art. So why might that be?
Because they travelled from there.
And quite so, yeah. So the first people to come to Aotearoa came from Eastern Polynesia many, many centuries ago. And with them, when they came, they brought their language, culture, they brought technology, they brought items of horticulture with them, they brought all sorts of things, but one of the things that we're pretty sure that they brought with them was rock art. So all of the thinking and the practice about rock art they brought with them. So Just to kind of emphasise that point, we've got some Tongan rock art, some Hawaiian rock art, and some Māori rock art, and I've chosen all human figures. So when you think about it, if I handed out a piece of paper and a pencil to everyone in this room and said, draw a human figure, we'd all draw something quite different. But in the case of the rock art, there seems to be quite a lot of similarity, like over thousands of miles of sea and up and down country as well. So here in the Māori rock art, we've got a figure from Weka Pass up in North Canterbury. This one's from Kaikoura, this one's from South Canterbury, that's the South Canterbury. This is Clifton down in Southland. This is North Otago, South Canterbury, South Canterbury, South Canterbury, South Canterbury, North Otago. So there's quite a spread there. So it's not about it being the same artist. That's a lot of area to cover for one person. It's about having a shared knowledge or an agreement of how something is presented. So I think we've got similar things in our modern day life, haven't we? If you think about, here's a horrible example, the McDonald's Golden Arch, which has connotations to me of obesity and random capitalism and all those things, but I'm sure there's different connotations for different people.
Yummy.
There we go. Yes. So yeah, so if you're thinking about the rock art, yeah, there's definitely, you know, shared understanding of what these symbols mean. Back on the subject of age and dating and how old is the rock art, another way we can think about this is what do we see in the rock art, and we see figures that of birds that are long extinct. So on the far side we've got Poakai, the giant eagle, so the haast eagle that had a 3-metre wingspan and circled around in the sky preying on small children and other things. And then on this side we've got moa figures, so both those birds have been extinct for more than 500 years. And when you look at the moa figures, it's not, you know, it looks to me like these drawings were made when moa were around. They're quite naturalistic, they're not, you know, kind of abstract ideas of what a moa might be. They look like the person that drew them saw them. So that suggests those figures at least are very old. And then we've got rock art that's got different kind of things in it. For instance, this sailing ship. Now this is from a site down in Preservation Inlet. It's a very interesting site. It has the sailing ship, then it has more of what we think of, oh, that's like old rock art. And then there's another panel over here that has the names of a ship and all the sailors on it. So there's a lot happening in this cave, but also in this image we have a kind of weird marine hammerhead sharky kind of figure, and below it we have some writing that says Piwa, a name. And the rock art was a practice that was continued over time, and so when new things came into the environment, when sailing ships came, when missionaries came and started teaching reading and writing, those things were getting incorporated into the rock art using the same practices or ways of doing the art at the same places, but just a different subject matter. And it's not an evolutionary thing where this is the old rock art and now we're going on and we're doing the new things. Those old rock art designs were being made side by side with these new things. So it's not we're throwing out the old and we're on with the new. They're just getting amalgamated into that practice. So I think we can safely say that rock art came with those first people that came to Aotearoa, was in practice at the time of Moa and Puakai, the giant eagle, continued on until contact with Europeans. Another question, how is the rock art made? So, unfortunately, a lot of the traditional knowledge around rock art is no longer with us, and that's a product of colonisation and loss of land. So, when European settlers came to Aotearoa and the land started being taken up for farming, and the land was purchased, vast tracts of land purchased by the Crown and then on sold to settlers, life changed. The places where rock art was created were now private land with fences and different understandings. So a lot of the traditional knowledge we had that was available about rock art centuries ago we don't have. But one of the things we do have, this tiny little gem, is a recipe for rock art paint. This was collected by Beatty, who was an ethnographer in the 1920s or teens, and he cycled around North Otago and South Canterbury on a bicycle, interviewing kaumātua, and he interviewed Tāre Maiharua about many topics, but one of the topics was how, a recipe for rock art paint. So, burn the branches of the manuao. Manuao is a resinous pine that you can burn when it's green. Catch the rising smoke on a tipaki, which is a fine woven flax mat. Scrape the soot into an ipu. An ipu is a bowl. Chip the bark of the tarata tree, so tarata lemon wood, and collect the gum. Gather rotawhiri berries, crush and squeeze them in a kete. Hang the kete by the fire and let their oil drip into the ipu. Add weka oil. These 4 ingredients were mixed in certain proportions, not too thick nor too thin, and the result was an ink that would stand forever. And so it has. So that is a recipe for black paint, and we presume that the recipe for red paint was similar, but it used kōkowai. So you can see here, Wendy has crushed some kōkowai. Kōkowai is iron oxide, and Māori Whenua River is a massive source of kōkowai. So we're right in the heartland of all of these happenings and ingredients here. So I think many people think perhaps rock art's created using a bird stick. It's not. It's the majority of it is pigment in solution, so it's a paint. All of those ingredients have a specific chemical property and a reason for being in that paint. Binders, the oils make them kind of waterproof, and just a fabulous technology there, very sophisticated. So the canvas. So as we know, most Māori rock art and Te Waipōnama is applied to limestone, which provides a smooth, pale surface that is porous, so it absorbs the paint, and that's another reason why it's around today. It can also be easily abraded or carved, and that's another way of making rock art too. So thinking about the sites in our local landscape, that's limestone. That's the limestone geological map for limestone, so you can see the overlap there. Not all rock art is applied to limestone. There were rock art sites in the upper Waitaki, but they were lost as a result of the damming up there, and they were applied to greywacke, so quite a different rock. So, painting and drawing, black and red pigment. The top figure is from a place called Dog Rock and Cave in South Canterbury, and you can see the figure again, and that figure appears to be holding some kind of a staff or a taiaha or something, and there's another tiki figure or human figure beside that's holding some kind of maybe a kete, not really sure. And then you've got the beautiful red scroll work from just down the road at Tahu, which is an amazing example of, it's quite unique, that figure. There's not another one like that around. You can also create a rock art by abrading limestone or applying clay to create a white colour. and sometimes the surface of the limestone was abraded just using a rock or another piece of limestone to scrape off that kind of weathered, hardened surface and get a bright, clear white underneath to apply the art to. These figures are from South Canterbury, so a place called Beautiful Valley. This has got a kind of a human figure, but it's hard to see here, but it's got a weird, like, lower body that looks more like a crayfish. What's going on there? And this is I'm not really sure what's happening here, but it's a black, both figures use both black and white together, which is interesting. Rock art can be carved or incised as well. So carved, much like a wood carving. This one here is from Western, and it's been damaged. Even well-meaning people can damage rock art. So a person who wanted to record the rock art thought plaster of Paris could get a mould of this, and they did that. And when the plaster of Paris came off, so did part of the rock art, which was unfortunate. So I think the moulds in Canterbury Museum now. The rock art remains in place at Western, so yeah, it's a bit of a shame. And this one is from Earthquake, so just up the road, and it's really finely incised. It's quite different. And just so lucky in this area because of earthquakes, there's a little valley that's just filled with these engraved designs, and they're really uncommon, but this little valley is just chocker full of them, and it's just, they're very, very unique and really amazing, but also very fragile, just because of how they were made. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's Picasso in the blue period, you know, like swimming against the tide, something quite different. Everybody else is drawing, I'm incising. Yeah, weird one. So there can be figures that are both painted and incised, and you look at this and think, oh dear, that's a bit grim. And this is the reality of rock art and its conservation. So, like, one of the issues can be graffiti, and this is a very weathered site, and you may or may not be able to see the figure in the middle, but I'll make it a bit easier for you. So, yes, well, a double-winged porky, the giant eagle, and he's painted, but those swirly patterns, the koru, they're incised into it. It's like a technique known in Europe as graffito, so it's a combination of incising and painting. Now, a lot of people ask me, what does the rock art mean? And I say, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know anyone that does. So I treat it more like a, you know, those old ink blot tests that psychiatrists would give you, and you'd look at it and you'd see something and they go, well, that's how I use rock art. And I say to people, what do you see? And that tells me I gain deep insights into their psychology. Sometimes people come up with some out there things, particularly kids. So I think the question is, what do we see? Like, what do we see? We're never going to know the intent of the artist. You know, that knowledge is gone now. So it's, what do we see? And I think one of the most frequently seen images is the human form, and I've put three together here that are all quite different, and there's a lot of variety there, but in reality, there's quite a lot of commonality too. So we've got the Chalky Island art, then we've got earthquakes, three-fingered man, woman, and then we've got Dog Rock at Cave. We've got slightly more kind of naturalistic figures. So they're all very cool. And then a bit closer to home, in the Awamuko Creek area, we've got this really cool figure, which has two human figures back to back. But the sophistication of Māori rock art, if you look at that, you think, oh, look at that, two figures back to back. That mirror each other and look like a tiki figure. So this isn't just you know, I'm going to have a wee tutu. This is really thought through, and also you might have noticed this blank central space in some of the designs, and that's a really common design feature, and using negative space to create a design. There's another use of negative space to create design too, so it's quite sophisticated. It's not, you know, there's a lot of thought and practice going on here.
From what you've seen, Amanda, do you think that artists ever did stuff over other people's art, like in the Māori context, not necessarily in the like graffiti context?
Yeah, good question. Because like one site that springs to mind for me is over at Te Anō, so over at Western, and there you've got superimposition of different colours and different figures. But the question there is, yes, it's one over the other, but what's the time gap between? Is it right then, or is it like 10 years later, or is it a century later, or is it 500 years later? So yeah, that's a good question. And there has been a thesis written on, you know, that topic of, is the placement of rock art, you know, later done respectfully or whatever, but that's an unanswerable to me. This is another one of those kind of theses. Yep, no one will ever know, can't say you're right, can't say you're wrong. So here, again, some nice local examples of rock art, and there's that beautiful three-fingered human being, and that gives you a sense of scale of it. Like there's rock art that's tiny and hidden, and there's rock art that's just fragmentary now, and then there's rock art, you know, so it's, yeah, there's all manner of it. And then this is just up the road at Māori whenua, colloquially known as the Umbrella Man. I don't repeat that, because of this. Yeah, it's like, I think it's an umbrella, but, and I like the spiral work in the torso. Is that tattooed person, two tattooed people? So yeah, interesting stuff. Another thing that is something seen in the rock art is birds. So this top one, which is again reminiscent of that big wingspan of Kurakai the giant eagle, but it's a bit of an abstract one, and Kurakai the eagle seems to have grown some legs. And then down here we've got, this is from Te Mananui in Frenchman's Gully down at Māori in South Canterbury, near the Pariora River, and this one's got bird peacock, so top up bird, bottom down person, and the top figure there has got teeny tiny birds on the wings of the main bird, and in amongst it there's something that looks a bit like a dolphin or a shark, so yeah, interesting stuff. And then another one from South Canterbury that's maybe a bit more kind of naturalistic. It's like, oh, that's quite decent. And it's still got, you know, this use of negative space again and again and again. What else do we see? We see dogs. So dogs, well, kuri came with, so Polynesian dogs came with those first people that came to Aotearoa. And again, like looking at these dogs, there's many ways to draw a dog, but the dogs are all coming up pretty similar. Again, that blank central space. So this piece here, that's a drawing of this, is in Otago, New Zealand. It comes from the Ahuriri River area. This one is from Te Anō or Tiniwai, as we know it now, gorge up in Albury, South Canterbury, kind of heading towards Mackenzie. Here's a local doggy figure, and this one has been known in the past as the Dirty Dogs for reasons that may be apparent if you look at it. So again, you've got beautiful dog figures with that, you know, just that really characteristic shape. And then you've got also a kind of a bird figure, which, yeah, could be an anthill or one of those extinct kind of goosey creatures.
Where are these ones?
These are in Ngāi. these other things that defy categorisation, and when I'm talking about, rock art and what do we see, the kind of categories I'm giving them are what I see, or what feel like are obvious. A dog is a dog is a dog. These, I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. So they remind me of like, look, I think, they're kind of insecty, but there's hands there, and that one's long and googly eyes, and I don't know what these things are, but they're extraordinary and startling. Here's some more. This one's been, it's just using a software that brings up different pigments. So a lot of rock art's really faded and really hard to see with the human eye, but then when you run it through a particular software, you might see something like this and go, wow, no, that was it. So this is another just to think, I don't know, but it's very cool. This fellow, he's a little cutie, and we've had a child's interpretation of this as SpongeBob.
He's definitely been to a party.
Something's going on. But here's like, I don't know. And I think the nice thing about rock art, and one of the things that I really enjoy about it, is the fact that we don't know, like it just gives you space to mull it over and to think about it in an active way rather than me saying, this is a SpongeBob. Now you'll think, she's lost it. Now what's she doing? Why is she asking if it's art? She's just been talking about it as art. Oh no! Is it art? And I think I'm posing the question here, is art the right word for it? Or is art, the way we think of art, the right word for it? So, from the Oxford Dictionary, the expression or application of human skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty and emotional power. Some of those things seem like they fit with rock art, but when we're thinking of art, we kind of think of art. Here's the art. It happens to be rock art. But anyway, I should have bought a different kind of art that wasn't rock art, but anyway. Art is something we look at, we admire, we hang on the wall, we might see it in an art gallery. But I think we need to just kind of explore our thinking or understand how our thinking or our language can cause us to maybe misinterpret what we're seeing. So a lot of the books on rock art, and there aren't very many on Māori rock art, there's only a couple, and they're quite old now, gap market there. They're decontextualising the art, they're taking it off the wall of the cave and they're putting it two-dimensionally onto a white page in black. So it's kind of like saying, this is the art, this bit. And the figure on this side, the beautiful reptilian figures, the Orchids Taniwha frieze, is in fact 1 metre wide, 4 metres long, on the ceiling of a cave, and parts of that design incorporate the undulations and the pits and the swellings of the actual limestone face. So taking it off, putting it onto a two-dimensional page, it changes it, and it changes how we think of it. And I think it's useful sometimes to turn away from the art and look out of the cave. The other really cool thing about rock art is it's such a tangible connection to heritage, isn't it? It's like you're standing in the footprints of the person that created the art, and I think it's when you're in a place where there is rock art, sometimes it's good to turn around and look outside of the cave and think, what would life have been like? What would have this land been like? What was going on here? That's Rachel and I. And we're in the cave of the Taniwha. It's above us, you can't really see it in that photo. So, just thinking about the wider cultural context and what we know about this area. So that circle down the bottom, that's where I've had the map of the rock art very near to us. That's that area there. That's the upper Waitaki going up into Pukaki. That's another kind of area of rock art too. So just thinking about rock art in its wider cultural context. That big blue line, what might that be? Yeah, ever present and such a massive feature on the landscape. So the name Waitaki, a Kaitahu variant of Waitangi, is a commonplace name throughout Polynesia. So again, emphasising those connections with, you know, the Eastern Polynesian homeland. Although the specific tradition behind the name has been lost, it literally means the waterway of tears and is often referred to in the Waikōrero oratory as representing the tears of Ngāi. The river was an important ara tāwhito, so that's a main highway, a routeway, an ancient trail, providing direct access to the rich inland mahinga kai resources of Manahuna in Central Otago. So mahinga kai, that's mahi meaning work, kai meaning resources. It's the work of collecting resources. The use of mokahi is strongly associated with the Waitaki mokahi, a beautiful reed rafts, and is one of the few places where this traditional practice continues today. So if you're interested in the local Māori or local Ngāi Tahu mana whenua history of our region, a very good resource is Ka Huru Manu, the Ngāi Tahu Atlas, which you can find online. So this is information from there. So the river was an important source of mahinga kai, and numerous kainga nohoanga settlements and kainga mahinga kai food gathering places were located on both sides of the river. So here's now the geography test for you. What's that river? It's the well done. You get an A+. So the back, the Māori name is slightly different from what we know it as today. So the Awa Māko, and it was a place where arohi, kora, and tuna were collected. So arohi is bracken fern root that's pounded to a powder. Kora is a thing called, was known as Māori cabbage, so it's a green, a leafy green thing, but I'm not sure what the actual species was, and of course tuna, the eel. So your next geography test.
What's that river?
Yes, very good. It is indeed the Māori whenua, and the Māori whenua was known for mahi kai, for weka, for puro, for kuil, and for tutu. So I always get puro wrong. It was known as a Māori onion, so again it'll be some kind of rooty, bulby thing. Kuil is karamu or kaporosma berries. So quite a range of food items there. Tutu is tutu berries. The seeds are poisonous, but they can be strained out and make a beautiful jelly or coil with it. And this little river, Waitaki, not much of a river these days, I guess. And there, tuna, the eel, and ko ariari. Ko ariari is the edible root of raupo. Raupo is bulrush. That one is Waitaki, and there was found weka, tuna, tutu, and papai, which is taramia or speargrass, and that resource was used to make a beautiful, beautiful perfume. So, yeah, so we're not just talking kai in terms of food, we're talking kai in terms of all sorts of resources. Another one, the otiaki, weka, tuna, puro, tapupu. Tapupu are snowberries, so another type of berry. And the final one, the Kuro River, or Kokuro, as it was known then, weka and tuna. So you can see that it's mahinga kai. This is a rich landscape. This is, we're not wanting for anything here. And in addition to this, like I can think of the Māori whenua, as I've said, it's a source of kōpoi of pigment. At the top end of Waitaki, there's a really big quarry for silkreed or waterboard site, where you can see Māori have been quarrying, knocking off flakes of this beautiful glassy stone, and they're used as knives. So all of that's still there. It's an amazing place. So a rich, rich landscape. So Mahinga Kai and Nobuaka, there's, again, it's a very sophisticated tradition, and there's a calendar to say these are the times that we collect these particular things. And the reason they're collected at particular times is they are best at this time, or if you collect them at this time, it's more sustainable, you're looking after the resource. So these are two kind of cultural practices that are also occurring geospatially around the rock art. We know what's happening around the rock art sites from the archaeology. So this is an excavation that we did at the Raincliffe Rock Art site up in South Canterbury. The excavation of floors of rock art sites can reveal more about the lives of the people that created the art. It can tell us what resources were collected, when people were using the sites, and in what season. So some of the things that we found at that site, and that central panel is just like a bird's eye view looking down on that panel that we've excavated, and I've colour-coded everything for your convenience. So fire-cracked rock is like these white things, so that's like somebody's had a hearth or a fireplace. Koriki in green is the New Zealand quail now extinct. Lots and lots and lots and lots of koriki in there, and part of the excavation is analysing all of the things that you've dug up. And so many hours were spent counting the koriki bones and trying to figure out how many birds does this represent, and the answer was 44. There you go.
Were the quails bigger than what they are now?
No, these are tiny bones, and that was like one of the most annoying factors about the analysis of that excavation.
Californian insects,
Yeah,
they
later.
introduced. Yeah.
So these are New Zealand quails. Kākahi, which is freshwater mussel. I don't know if you will have seen those, but they were a very handy resource that you could get in any creek or swampy area back in the day, and they're an amazing thing because they're an ecosystem engineer. They can filter up to 20 litres of water in an hour. So the loss of those is huge because in an environmental sense they were everywhere keeping the waterways clean, and as wetlands been drained and creeks straightened out and all that jazz, we're losing the kākahi, which are fabulous beasts. Turn of the eel, and the interesting thing, not many eel bones in here, but maybe enough for 5 eels. And they were jawbones, and the jawbones were very small, which tells you they were small eels. So, and specifically all the jaws were that size. So again, it's like targeting a specific size. We're not going for the big breeding ones, because those ones need to go when they need to breed. So, yeah. Moa bone in there, and tauka or taonga, which is artifacts. So all of these pink triangles are typically stone tools or flakes from making stone tools. And importantly, because it's a rock art site, it was really cool to find some korkowai or iron oxide in the excavation too. So from all of these things, and thinking about the Mahinga Kai calendar, we believe that this was a site that was kind of inhabited around autumn, which is interesting. So the rock art sites, besides being art galleries, maybe, or places to create art, they're also places to shelter from a very practical perspective. So if we're thinking about rock art and Mahinga Kai and all of those different things, and people moving around the landscape, I think it's like a coincidence of natural and cultural values. And this slide references a site up in South Canterbury that we take guided tours to, but the blue line's the Waitaki River, Aratawhito, main highway. There's your limestone areas. With limestone geology, there tends to be natural springs and wetlands around them, so very convenient. You've got the main highway, you've got the apartments, you've got water. And then this is an ancient wetland, so it's now drained, but it was a significant, massive wetland in the past. and would have been a major resource for fish, for waterfowl. So you've got the supermarket now, and the purple dots, they're the rock art sites. So there's in that particular limestone massif, there's 44 rock art sites. So it's an amazing, amazing place. That star is there to remind me that I did a site visit with a landowner, a farmer up here, and we were talking about, oh, there used to be this major wetland here, you know, hundreds of years ago. And he said, oh, Dad, he can remember when that was there. And I was like, oh, cool. And he said, yes. He said it was just bulrush, the whole thing. And it was like, oh, okay, I would have thought there'd be a mix of things. So that was news to me, but I was interested to know it. And then where that star is, this is a mōkahi. So mōkahi are made from bulrush and from kōraui, the flower heads of flax. Where that star was is this rock art design, which is, I love it because it's like that connection between the art and the landscape and cultural practices. So it's a cool little, and it's not very often that you see like everyday life being represented in the rock art. So it's like, that's quite
There's a whole
unique.
story there, isn't there?
There is a whole story there. Something's going on.
Because it's actually out in just a little block now, and you'd think, why did they put that there?
Yeah.
Why is
It's pasture.
It's gone.
Surrounded by pasture. There's
Yeah.
no wetland.
So this isn't open to the public, this one?
No, it's on a private land. That one. So protecting Māori rock art, like any resource, to protect it you need to know some things about that resource. How many sites are there? Where are they? What condition are they in? Is the condition changing over time? What are the threats? And how are the threats managed and mitigated? So, one of the things that Ngāi Tahu has done was early on in the 1990s establish the South Island Māori Rock Art Project. So this is a rock art survey and recording project to create for posterity a permanent photographic record of all of the sites that we could reasonably expect to find in the South Island. Not a small job. To produce a record of the art definitive enough to allow effective decisions relating to resource management and conservation. So the SIMRAC project is now produced an archive of tens of thousands of rock art images, which is a massive and really important tribal archive. And just, these are kind of, we broke, for the survey, it's broken into blocks, which are kind of catchments around creeks. So lots of different blocks in the North Otago area. So there had been some rock art sites recorded prior to this, but the benefit of doing a really systematic and thorough survey is that you find a lot more sites. So it's added a tremendous amount of rock art sites to what was known beforehand. So SIMRAC started in 1989, that's many moons ago, and it went on for many years, right up until the, quite recently in fact. So yeah, it's, and I think SIMRAC was really, it was a factor in the establishment of the Rock Art Trust. So wow, we know about all this rock art. Ooh, it seems like it's a threat, and condition of some of it's not good. We need to establish a standalone entity that will be really focused on looking after that rock art. A question to ask is, what are we protecting? Like, are we protecting the drawing itself? Are we protecting the panel that the art is on? We do that by cutting it off and sticking it in a museum. Are we protecting the limestone outcrop that it sits on? Are we protecting the archaeology in the shelter floor? Are we protecting the wider cultural values like marking and kai and those important freshwater resources that go alongside the rock art sites? I think there's been kind of evolution in the way people manage heritage or think about it, and it used to be, we're protecting the art, and now it's we're protecting those broad cultural values and trying to bring back the context to the art. So what are the threats? Oh, you name it. Normally collections of national heritage are kept in the museum in beautiful environments, but not so the rock arts out there in wind and weather. So physical damage, things that are touching the rock art, often tractor tyres if we're talking on a farm, or could be bales of hay, could be farming equipment. But it's also physical damage can be done by tree roots. So lots of things like that. Dust being blown against the rock art site, and Rachel and I, we've just been down cleaning pigeon poo and other things off the signs at Takiroa, and huge amount of dust there, and yeah, that can just be abrasive. Stock, licking, rubbing, nibbling, pooing, trampling on the archaeology, all not good. Changes in microclimate, so vegetation goes up in front of a rock art site, shades it, it gets kind of damp and moss grows. Changes in hydrology around the site, so saturation, seepage and salts. And that last one, of all of the things affecting rock art, water is a massive one. Why is water a massive one? Well, back to my earlier experiment, where I placed a piece of limestone in some raspberry cordial. Now that's the line where the cordial sat, and you can see that the limestone's it's sucking it up. That's capillary action. So limestone's porous, and it's not just, what we're seeing here isn't just on the outside. Here is one that I prepared earlier.
It's like a Colgate ad for the
Yes,
1980s.
Yes, someone remembers that ad. This is what has inspired this very experiment. So this one I had sitting for about an hour and a half, and it's tracked right the way up. Yeah, and then when you crack it open, it's right through it. So limestone, great canvas, but not great for
So how can you protect it on farmland that is private?
We'll get to that. Yeah, I mean it's tricky because it is out in the wind and weather, and there's all sorts of things. And I think the main issue with protection of rock art is most people don't even know it exists. Like the people with rock art on their property might not know that it exists. So education, and that's one of the reasons why the Rock Art Trust established Te Ana Māori Rock Art Centre up in Timaru. If you haven't been there, then I suggest you go. So Māori rock art and wider land use. So some people in the room may recognise this area. So these white dots are rock art sites, and the Trust was lucky enough to get a Vision Mātauranga grant, which allowed us to work with a scientist, a hydrogeologist, who his whole professional life is about that. The transit of water around the place, particularly through rock. And he did lots of modelling around irrigation practices and moisture and limestone, and at the end of the day we came up with a kind of buffer zone of 300 metres around the rock art sites as being like an area in which particular activities might have an impact on rock art. So it's not they will, but they potentially could, depending on the activity, depending on the topography, depending on the amount of water, depending on lots of things. But what is good about having a buffer zone like this is it triggers a conversation. It flags up. So if there's a resource consent, if somebody's applying to do a particular project or activity on their land and they have to apply for resource consent, these kind of buffer zones trigger a bit more fine-grained examination of what that activity is and how it might impact on rock art. So I've got this slide that you can take away, printed out on paper, and it kind of just shows you all of the various ways that water management can affect rock art sites. So if this is your big limestone outcrop, and then at the base of it here you've got the kind of the natural water table, so where the water sits if it's not, nothing changes in the environment. If you've got a large, like a pivot irrigator on top, this brown area might be dirt, so you're not even seeing the limestone up there, so everything's being irrigated. And if you're irrigating in a way where there's lots of water being generated in a less efficient way, then you might get the flow through of water into the limestone, and that is not a good thing. And with it, you know, if effluent's being sprayed as well, you might be getting contaminants into the limestone as well. You might get water going down cracks in the limestone, and it's slowly making its way towards the face. You could get seepage across the face of the art, you could get salt bloom, and that's when salts get drawn through that big marine deposit and deposited on the face of the outcrop, affecting the art. So there's lots of things that can happen with water. But also if you're, so groundwater abstraction, so bores, taking water away, that can pull the water table down, and that can affect those associated freshwater resources like wetlands and springs can be affected, and they are part of the cultural landscape and part of the wider cultural picture around the rock art sites. You could get irrigation spray drift. An extreme case I've seen of this is K-line pod with the water just shooting up onto the face of the outcrop, so that's not ideal obviously. So yeah, there's many things to think about, and I think if you think about that and then you think about irrigation practices in and around rock art sites, there's just some very sensible and practical things that you can do to like reduce the risk. Here's a local example, and this was a natural event that caused this. I'm not saying about irrigation in this, I hasten to add. So what we have here, this was Tahu 2010 maybe. What we see here, you think, oh my god, holy cow, 70 tonne of limestone just came down, which is very alarming to many people, myself included. And you can see the smoking gun up here, and you can see it down here. Now what's happened here, this is all like soil staining. There's been a fracture here, there's been a plant growing, putting down its roots and gradually expanding them and creating a fracture in that piece of limestone. And that piece that fell off, it's massively overhung, so it was like that. And it sat out like a big nose from the outcrop. And this was one of those real weather bomb events that we get, and it's just like flooding everywhere. And the limestone got utterly saturated, as we've seen, possible, and then you've got a fracture zone, and the saturation of the limestone increases the weight, and down she comes. So that's a really, like a good example of how water can affect limestone. Quite dramatic, and makes you rethink your occupation. If you work around limestone, yeah, rock art, it's like, oh, I work with that.
Put your umbrella.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, the gods must be smiling on me because you can still be today. So this is an example of seepage. So you're kind of seeing the rock art, there's a bit of bleed around it. You can see cracks in the limestone where there's salt coming out, and this is salt bloom down here, so that it kind of just pulls the salts to the surface of the outcrop, and that is very damaging to rock art, obviously. Nitrate contaminants the salt bloom, so yeah, you can see the salt bloom here, and we took some samples of this, just analysing what's in those salts. And there's normal things that you'd expect to find in limestone like gypsum and calcite, but in this lot there was also nitrate, which wasn't a surprise because it's in the middle of an operating farm, and cows used to inhabit the area in front of it, so you know it's not surprising, capillary action, water, that these things are getting sucked up. How can we help you to look after rock art? How can the Māori Rock Art Trust help you? Well, for one thing, we can provide reports about all of the rock art sites on your property. So that includes a map that locates all of the rock art sites, images of each of the sites to make it really easy to find, maps of the shelter, maps showing where the individual figures are, pictures of the individual figures, all of those details. So knowledge is power, and The North Otago area was first surveyed by SIMRAP back in the 1993 and then again in 2017, so we have really good records of the art in this area, only if we have to share them, and that's usually part of the deal when we go onto a property and survey the rock art, is providing all of that information back to the landowner. We can do a site visit to your property, give specific advice on the threats to the sites and how to mitigate them, provide input into your farm environmental plan, the threats and mitigations to rock art. We can provide input into resource consent applications, preferably before you submit them, because otherwise you'll submit them and then I'll be asked to comment on them, you know. So it's better to, you know, look at it in a positive way. What can I do to, you know, look after this treasure in my own backyard? What can landowners do to help us? So compliance with regulatory mechanisms, and I thought this slide on this particular day, talking about compliance of the same day where Groundswell's doing a, you know. But anyway, it does help to be compliant with different industry standards as well. So I did an assessment on, it was a forestry blocks being put onto a landowner's property, and they were using the forestry industry standards, and they were in a sensitive catchment zone as well, a low flow catchment zone, and they'd done everything right, and that really helped to protect rock art. So farm environmental plans that where you've got simple things done, the sites are identified, the threats are managed. So everybody on the farm knows where the rock art sites are and knows not to put the K-line pod with the water directed towards the rock art. Simple things. Voluntary legal protection mechanisms like QE2 or Heritage New Zealand Covenants are really good. A lot of rock art sites are protected via significant natural areas, and they're usually in place to do with the ecological or landscape values of the limestone outcrops, not the rock art, but anyway, the rock art gets protected as a you know, as part of that, which is great. Physical protections, fencing, stock exclusion, water management, thinking about fertiliser and other contaminants that might affect the rock art, storage of equipment and outcrops, and then relationships and knowledge are really, knowledge is power, relationships are everything. So connecting with mana whenua, that would be Waitaki in this area, connecting with the Rock Art Trust, connecting with Heritage New Zealand, who are also very helpful people, connecting with ECAM no comment. If you want to learn more, come visit us. Come to Te Ao Māori Rock Art Centre in Timaru and take a site visit to the property that we lease at Waitaki. So here, this is the beautiful cave where the beautiful Ōpahi Taniwha resides. It's caged. What we are trying to do here is to bring back some of those wider values, those mahinga values, those freshwater values. Amazing, amazing spring-fed creek coming down here through pine forest. When I first visited this site, it was just a complete pasture, limestone outcrops, fantastic rock art pasture. So yeah, we've got a limestone ecologist, Peter Hennon, who's helping us decide what are the plants that were there in the past. And yeah, so we planted 25,000 native plants on that property, of an expected 47,000, which we're going to do over 10 years. So, and that helps us tell that bigger story. So it helps us to not only look at the art within the rock shelter, but also to turn and look outward and think, wow, what was life like back then? So you're very, very welcome to come and visit us. And lastly, why do we protect rock art? It's really about more Tahu, more ka uri, muri aki nei for us and our children after us. So it's a treasure, it's all of our treasure. It's something that's unique and really special to us all as New New Zealanders, and yeah, it'd be great to see it around for generations to come. So thank you for listening to me rave on about rock art. I appreciate that. And if you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Well, I might not be able to, but I'll give it a crack. Yeah.
Are there any links between the Māori rock art and then the carvings that are throughout all the Māori buildings and things? You know, that's all carving, and this is rock art. And there seems to be two different forms.
There's, yeah, I mean, you look at it and you think, but you can see, like, really, you can see commonalities in design between lots of things, between rock art and, you know, those traditional carvings, but also, like in Otago Museum, I've seen a pendant that is one of those particular designs. Oh, yeah. And then I've seen a carved piece of bone that is so reminiscent of some of the design work of the Taniwha figure. So yeah, there's definitely those, it's part of a broader, you know, tradition of art. Yeah.
Will you look at opening any more public sites?
Not really up to us. So as I said, of the 761 Māori rock art sites recorded in Te Waipoma, only 2 are under the direct management of Ngāi Tahu, and that's Tahu and Māori whenua. They were vested back to Ngāi Tahu on settlement with the Crown. And so Rūnanga Waitaki has the, you know, the direct management of those sites, which is really good. We lease the property at Waitaki. We aspire to be landowners one day. May never happen. But yeah, there's very few sites that are under the direct management of the iwi, which is a really sad thing, and you know, just a byproduct of colonisation and loss of land. But the vast majority of the sites are on private land. So yeah, which is a double-edged sword. It's really good that they are on private land in some respects because people can't get to them. People can be one of the main nuisances to rock art, so that's good in that respect. But yeah, like we've seen, there's all sorts going on private land too. So there's probably about 20 publicly accessible rock art sites around the place. We've got the 2 here. There's been half a dozen or more up in South Canterbury. There's some in North Canterbury. Yeah, that's it. Oh, there's one. Yeah, there's another one in North Canterbury. So yeah, there's not many. And most of them are not very well presented either, which is a real shame. I think probably Takiroa and Māori whenua are the best presented of the publicly accessible rock art sites. So that was a deliberate strategy. It's a statement saying Ngāi Tahu really value rock art sites, particularly here in this place where there are so many rock art sites around. So it's very deliberate to, you know, to make that statement. So yeah.
Does ECAM have any authority to make landowners fence them off?
We can't be compelled to do these things, but I think in the kind of ever-increasing environment of rules, regulations and compliance, like farm management plans that tend to look at a range of different environmental factors, and farm environmental plans are now incorporating cultural values as well. So I've got a farm environmental management plan here that has a subject of Māori rock art, the things that these people are doing. They've identified where the rock art sites are. Everyone on the farm knows where they are. They're managing their irrigation to manage adverse effects. They've excluded stock from the sites. They're considering getting the Rock Art Trust in to do a really fine-grained assessment and then follow the recommendations of that. So, like, this is really good. So, no, you can't be compelled to, and in some circumstances you don't need to. You know, like if there were paddocks that were fenced and the stock were on this side, the rock art was on that side, no problem. You don't need to fence the rock art sites themselves. So, yeah, it's all different circumstances. Having said that, the rock art itself, like any other heritage item, so anything over 100 years old, it's illegal to damage, destroy or modify it. So it is protected in that sense. So you're on the wrong side of the law if you allow damage to occur to it. Yeah.
about Tahu whenua.
Yeah. And there are around 130 rock art sites that have been recorded through the New Zealand Archaeological Association database. So that's a kind of an ad hoc. These are sites that have been recorded over decades, since the 1950s basically. So there are people like us in the North Island that are obsessed with rock art and looking for it all the time. And I would say, like, I know one recorder up there's recorded more than 200 sites. So probably there's as much, if not more, rock art in the North Island than there is down here. The difference is there hasn't been that systematic survey for it, which is a shame. Might happen in the future, would be awesome. And the rock art in the North Island is quite different from the rock art in the South Island too, which is a really interesting thing in and of itself. So, yeah.
Amanda, so thank you very much. We've got a little goodie bag for you.
Is there fossils?
There's always going to be here for you. Just so thank you very much for teaching us all about Māori rock art and the treasure that it is.